Hello, hello. Welcome back to Exploring DC episode 3. Very glad you're here. Thank you for exploring with us. I am not alone, as per usual. My co-host Jalen Singleton is out for the week, but with me is my other co-host, the lovely Jackson Wells. Jackson, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you? It's a beautiful, semi-beautiful Monday morning. It's evening. It's Monday evening. Yo, I've not left my room today, bro. My
Already
sense of time is
started.
fucked.
Already starting off. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's cold up here.
Yeah.
It's like what was it? 12 degrees out today. It felt
Oh,
like
very
negative.
very nice.
Felt like negative 10. So we were pretty miserable. But um, I'm very excited to talk about this movie. Today, my friends, we are getting into a new documentary that came out at the end of last year. The first DC Studios release, actually, so far. It is called Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, directed by Ian Bonhote and Peter Edegay,
Yep.
featuring the Reeves family, so Chris, Dana, Will, Matthew, Alexandra, and then his ex-wife, Gay Exton. And this movie is kind of just chronicling Christopher Reeve's journey with he had an equestrian accident in 1995 which left him paralyzed, and he struggled to deal with that at first, and it was this big cultural moment because Superman, like the invincible, most iconic character and an actor that was known to embody that role, suddenly felt completely different to what Superman was. And it kind of shows his resilience for all that and his dedication to
Yeah.
family, and just a really, really beautiful piece. I'm going to start off, Jackson. What is your kind of history with Christopher Reeve's Superman and just him as an actor?
Yeah, so I pretty much only know him from Superman, and that's a movie I was showed by my dad when I was very, very, very young.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a movie that's, when I think of Superman, that was kind of the default image I had in my head.
Yeah. That's kind of like my whole thing too with Batman. I grew up with Tim Burton and
Yeah.
Christian Bale and all that. With Superman, I kind of never really grew up with a Superman. I didn't watch a lot of the movies when I was younger, and even I mean Man of
I'm
Steel
the
was
same
coming
way.
out. Man of Steel was coming out, but I was younger, so I wasn't exactly interested in something
Yeah.
like that dark. And
No,
so
I was
Chris,
the same.
yeah, so Christopher Reeve kind of came to me later in life, and watching this documentary, I learned so much because I
I
I
did too.
knew very surface level stuff about him.
Me too.
But I think that plays into an interesting topic that they bring up in the movie is that he's kind of only known for Superman. Like he tried
Hmm.
to do all these different roles and nothing ever clicked.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting kind of point of the movie as a whole is that he never got the chance, right? Like he
Right.
never he never really got to break out of that Superman cycle. He never really got to truly go out and try something ambitious and different.
Yeah. I it's one of those great what ifs of like what would his career have looked like if he had kept going. But at the same time, you look at where he was kind of when the equestrian accident happened. He was doing a lot of like TV work and a lot of lower budget stuff. He tried to branch out into all these
Yeah.
different awards roles, and it's just for some reason people never saw him break away from that Superman role.
Yeah. But also it's like I didn't get the vibe the movies he was in outside of Superman were necessarily well received.
Right. No,
Which I
I
haven't
agree.
seen them for myself, so I
Yeah.
can't tell you like if they're good or not, or if he's good in them or whatever. But I did get the vibe that just they were not considered to be very good. Out,
Yeah.
you know.
No, I get that too. And even something I thought interesting was that they got into as like directorial work, which all happened actually post accident. And even that,
Yep.
nothing ever really like stuck out. He I was looking at his 3 movies. It was 2 movies kind of about being disabled and very personal stories, and then he directed an animated baseball movie
I
which
saw
he like
that. I was
co-directed, and I'm like
like, what the fuck is this?
of of all the things, his career is just so interesting to me because he
Yeah.
really was like the most successful or one of the most successful DC actors of all time. Like I was really thinking about it, and he was the only actor to play like the title DC character in more than 3 movies because everyone only got to a trilogy. Even like you would think about Christian Bale, or I don't even know who else got trilogies.
Yeah, I guess that's still true, isn't it?
Yeah, he was the only one to do
That's
four.
wild.
And I mean, the amount of money that Superman made too back in the day, Superman 2 did great, and then 3 and 4 kind of had diminishing returns, but like I think because he never got to do other stuff and nothing ever stuck, I feel like people kind of underestimate how big he was at the time.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess like for people our age, that's kind of a hard thing to really get context for. We were not even a thought when
Right.
when these movies were dropping. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to kind of look back in this doc and understand. Okay, this is really the size of fandom that he was at, right?
Yeah. It's
Or stardom, rather. Sorry.
it's one of those interesting things too. I mean, I know you're big with film. How do you feel about like when an actor kind of gets stuck in one role? Like they're only known for being that one character and they're never able to really break away
You
from it.
really, it sucks to see that happen because oftentimes I feel it happens to really talented people.
I agree.
I think that someone like Tom Holland has been really stuck and known for playing. He's been in a lot of other things, but they've mostly been bad,
Yeah.
to put it kindly.
Uncharted was
Uh,
great. What do you mean?
oh yeah, my bad. Which he just got cast in the new Nolan, so I'm really,
Yeah.
really hoping that that's a sign of things to come for him because I think he's a
Yep.
really talented actor.
Yeah.
You see that a lot with these big franchise films. You saw that with a lot of the actors in Star Wars, for example.
Yep.
That happens quite often there.
hmm
So and it's just not ever something that I like to see because you can tell that they're good at what they do.
Yeah.
Or even
I
like Bryan Cranston, Breaking Bad,
hmm
right? Like he has not had the resurgence since that I think a lot of people were anticipating when that show released, right? Like
Yeah, because he was on top of the world, and now it's like he's around, but he's appearing in stuff like Argyle and like your 12th build character, and it's like
yeah,
where did that? It's got to be a double-edged sword of like frustration because on the one hand you're set off and you're like an iconic part of pop culture and movie
yeah.
history and all that, but on the other hand it's like you want to do other
That's
stuff and you want to like be bigger than what the character is.
yeah, and it's like that. It's hard to convince people that you're not just that guy, right?
Right.
Like I think that is something that Bryan Cranston has kind of struggled with is like trying to find a role that's different, find something that's fresh. I don't know. I just don't know if the opportunities have even come across his desk.
Yeah. I even like especially with superhero roles, I see a lot lately of you look at the MCU Avengers and what they've tried to do, like Downey trying to break out of Iron Man with Oppenheimer, or Chris Evans trying to do a million streaming projects to
I don't know what
not
the
be
hell he's
Captain
doing.
America.
He's on a similar trajectory as Holland right now.
Right. But like I feel like when people talk about if Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson are in a new movie, people are not saying their names. They're saying, "Oh, Captain America and Black Widow are
Yeah,
in a new movie."
I think that goes back to a thing where it's like movie stars aren't as much as thing anymore, and kind of the biggest thing audiences are drawn towards is characters rather
Right.
than a specific person. There are exceptions, obviously, but it's just not as the movie star aspect of Hollywood is just not as big as it used to be.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like people are attaching all these big names to certain movies. Like you have animated movies throwing every big name actor they can at it, or like you hear all these stories about something recently came out where it's like we're casting scripts based on the amount of social media followers you have, and it's a weird time in Hollywood, and I think it's always been interesting of like people prioritizing an actor over like who's best for the actual role.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. But yeah, bringing it back to the movie, what is your overall thoughts on just like the film and as a documentary and how it was?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know why I was just thinking about this while watching Superman, but it is staggering how much of a nightmare it is to edit together a documentary. Because I've recently been on the set of a documentary TV series, so I've
Okay.
kind of seen firsthand how these things are shot, how they're, how you get those insert shots of people walking down the street, shit like that, all the interviews. I've seen, I've been there during, you know, 10 plus interviews, so I've seen how that works. And you would just not believe how much people fucking ramble. I was watching this, like, I can't imagine editing this together. This is 50 minutes of a dude just straight yapping.
Yeah.
And it always impresses me. I guess now, like, watching this, I have kind of a newfound appreciation for just how these things are cut together. Because especially with a topic like this, where it's so heavy for so much of the film, I cannot imagine how just the process, even with there's so much archival footage, putting that in a way that makes sense and feels natural, and having a pace and a flow and a rhythm. And I know that's not what the actual technical side of it is not what we're going to be talking about for most of this, but that's just something I wanted to bring up before we kind of dive headfirst into the more emotional angles of it. I think it's just a really impressive thing. It's a really impressive form of filmmaking. Because you're a tone setter, you're making the pace if you're editing these things. It's not easy.
Right. Like right now, I'm in the midst of prepping for Oscar season because I love watching a lot of the movies, and one of the big sections is documentary filmmaking, and I love this time of year and like exploring all these different docs because I think it's just so impressive, the edits and the amount that people are able to throw in, because especially with this one, you had all these interviews, you had all this like home archival footage that they just shot from their
pictures.
House. And even like I was impressed by the excerpts they got from Chris Reeve because they pulled from his audiobooks, like his biographical audiobooks, and I thought that helped a lot because I loved hearing like when he first gets in his accident and you hear like all his like doubting thoughts from his audiobook, like that really set the tone.
Yeah, I as I said, I know how much of I'm having a better understanding of how much of a logistical nightmare all that shit is. So it's just you have to give props to everyone involved for actually like making a coherent thing out of this, because it's hard. And I know like filmmaking in general is hard, but it's just I guess I just recently gained a newfound appreciation for this in particular. Yeah. So everyone involved did a really good job. I mean, again, technically it's not anything earth shattering, but it's like it's coherent. It's well paced. It's well cut. They did a good job on all fronts.
I think a like talking head documentary can get a lot of flack for being pretty basic because in the day you're just setting a camera up in front of people and interviewing them. But I think you can sometimes get such interesting stories, and I think they did that here, where like it's just raw people explaining themselves and really diving into what Reeve meant to them and their family. And I think that is maybe more effective than if it was a more traditional, like trying to just put together a story with all the archival footage instead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think a talking head format for this was the right way to go. I think that kind of getting to hear from all the people closest to him, even people who were maybe done wrong by him, was really interesting. And I like that they didn't stray away from that. They never made him out to be, a perfect person. Yeah. And I think that was really nice to see that they didn't like overly sanitize it or try and like put him up on a pedestal or some shit,
Yeah, he felt very, very real and very authentic, even in a documentary that's essentially like hyping him up and glorifying like all this awesome stuff that he did. They did a good job showing those low points and showing how he repeated the sins of his family's past by like, changing marriages and all that stuff. And I think they really crafted a complex narrative with him.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that.
What takeaways do you have from everything you saw? Because my first one was that I feel all the emotions for his son, Will, because we find out in the documentary not only did Chris pass when Will was young, but then his mother passes, Dana Reeve, just a few years later from lung cancer, even though she didn't smoke at all. And it's just a crazy bad luck for Will.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. That was probably the biggest thing I didn't know going in.
Yeah.
So after they got to when Christopher Reeves passed away, I kind of thought the documentary would be wrapping up.
Right.
But it kind of got into this. I was like, what is? And then it's revealed that what happens, and dude, it felt like a punch to the gut. It was devastating. I just can't even, because it was in a really short. It was what, in a year and a half.
Yeah, it was.
I mean,
'Cause
that's
he died in
insane.
2004 and she passed away in 2006. So extremely fast. I can't even imagine like that news, like receiving that just after. It's
Yeah,
gotta have been such a tumultuous time, and this was like the last thing I watched before I went to bed last night, and
I
it
did
left
same.
me kind of wrecked.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Is like I was in such a bad mood after finishing this.
Yeah, but the other thing I took away from, I didn't know much about Dana, and I thought
I did not
like,
either.
wow, she was so equally charismatic, and like I feel like she was able to rival Chris. I was looking into her career; she did a lot of like TV stuff and not a lot of film. I really wish she had gotten to do more.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody. I guess that's a sign of a good documentary is when everybody you're focusing on is compelling and
Yeah.
they kind of keep your attention.
Hmm.
And it also a really, I think one of the most tragic moments of this was when Glenn Close, she said that she firmly believed Robin Williams would have still been alive
Yeah.
if Chris hadn't passed away. And that was like, because they just hold on her face for just a little bit, and that was a really impactful moment of the doc for me.
Yeah, I found because when you have like a friendship like Reeve and Robin Williams, it could have been really easy to just focus on that because Robin Williams is such a draw. But I
Yeah,
found the way they incorporated him was very tasteful and
it
very
was.
just I don't it just really everything was so authentic and so I don't lived in. I there wasn't an ounce of like superficiality. And you think with something called Superman, it's like, oh, is this just gonna be like, a prop piece for
Yeah,
DC or the Foundation or whatever? But it was extremely well done.
yeah. No, I completely agree. And as you mentioned, I did find the way that they incorporated Robin Williams to be really tasteful.
Hmm.
That especially the part where they showed his speech at the funeral.
Yeah.
That was another really impactful moment. Yeah, I just you're right. It was really authentic. It could have come off like really corporate, you
Yeah.
know, but it didn't feel that way. Even with the way that they set up some of the interviews, it did not feel sanitized, overly sanitized. You know?
Right. It I loved too the journey of because I don't know much. I don't have any very close disabled family members or friends, physically disabled, I mean.
Yeah.
So it was great looking into that kind of like perspective of things. And I liked how Chris's initial reaction to it was like, I'm temporarily here. Like, this is not where
Yeah.
I belong and stuff. And over time, he became like integrated into that community and that lifestyle, and he became
Hmm.
like the icon for it. I think that's a really compelling piece right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And just specifically that video where he comes out at the Oscars and he kind of presents something.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
That was another moment I found really impactful, and it's like it's also a reminder that this wasn't that long ago,
Yeah.
you know, because you
No, it
look out in the
wasn't.
crowd and you recognize most of the faces. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like you see a lot of people that are still the hot stars of today out in the crowd.
Yeah.
So it was not that long ago that this happened. Um, and I guess that just helps also put it into perspective, man. It's like he did a lot. He's made a lot of change in not that big a chunk of time. You know,
And that just
him and his
comes with
family rather.
just how charismatic and I mean what status he was at the time. And I think Dana's contributions were equally like super high, and that's why I'm glad at the end they renamed the foundation because it was such a collaborative effort. It's I I didn't think I'd have a lot to really like say about a documentary that's very family focused, but I was so impressed by everything that they kind of showed, not just like the presentation of it, but just the actual content of what was in it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But back to Will Reeve, another thing that I'm really excited for, if we want to tie it into DC, is that he is getting a cameo in the new Superman movie as a reporter because he is a ABC News broadcaster. And I
He
think,
is. I did not know that.
yeah, I think it's that's like such a lovely way to tie in Chris Reeve
Yeah,
and the classic Superman. I think that's going to be that's something
I, f-
I'm going to look out
I
for.
forgot about that.
Yeah,
That's right. I remember hearing about that now. I had totally forgotten that was happening. That's
yeah,
really sweet, and it's great that he's going to get to kind of, because it's obvious that the new Superman film is really going to be trying to pay tribute to Christopher Reeves and what he did with the character. Even the trailer makes that kind of abundantly clear. Um, and yeah, that's really sweet that he's going to get to be in there.
yeah. Honestly, I would have loved to see more of his other two kids,
I
Matthew
agree.
and Alexandra, because I think they had a really interesting perspective of, having a different mother, and then Chris basically
Not being
stepping
there all
away
the
from,
time, yeah.
yeah, and then he stepped away from that marriage essentially after things were taking a downturn, in his career. I think it would have been interesting to see them be a little more critical of that time in their lives.
That is one part where I would have liked to have seen them go a bit deeper. Where I like that they talked about it, but it's like I feel like they could have gotten a little bit more out of that because
Yeah,
they didn't really go into the kids like frustrations. Like, yeah, I mean, he was an absent father for
right.
a while, right? Like that had to have been hard.
Yeah. It's one of those things I think in most documentary stuff, and particularly when it comes to like movie production documentaries, I love seeing the tough stuff, like when
Yeah.
things didn't work and why and how people felt. And I wish that was incorporated so much more in documentaries like across the board, especially
Hmm.
stuff that's like highlighting you can highlight how great and how amazing and all this cool stuff, but I love seeing like the stuff that makes us human, like all those faults and stuff. And I think they scratched the surface of it, but they could have gone a
Yeah.
little deeper into it.
And if you're talking like, sorry, this is a bit of a side tangent, but like
No, go ahead.
specifically, you're talking about like film production,
Right.
like docs, right? I think
Hmm.
that's what makes like those Lord of the Rings documentaries so good. Is like they kind of show you everything with those.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you watch the I'll side tangent a little bit, but you watch those like Disney Plus documentaries or even like the
Yeah.
after shows for shows I love like Last of Us or Severance, which I love those little after shows, but a lot of it is just like, hey, this is all the cool stuff we did and like here's everything that worked. But I would love like that deeper dive of like, hey,
Hmm.
we cut this character or we cut this part and all that. And hopefully that could be something we get from DC is more documentaries that really
Yeah.
go into stuff.
Yeah, because I think that like it's more impressive seeing something that kind of comes together despite hardships. You know,
Right. That's
like
why
a lot of people like to pretend like it doesn't happen.
yeah, that's why what's the most famous movie documentary of all time is the Apocalypse Now
Yeah.
documentary, which is like, hey, this production was an absolute dumpster fire, but like here's how we like came through it all and made what a fantastic movie.
Yeah, one of the best movies ever. Like, yeah.
And
But I agree with you. I would have liked for them to just get a little bit because we mentioned how it didn't feel sanitized, and I
yeah,
still don't think it does. But that is just the one area where I was like, I wish you would just kind of given me a little bit more there.
right. And I feel like there is the component of like you don't want to cram it too much with information. You want to focus
Yeah.
on the right things, but at the same time, I think I maybe less of like here's all the bad stuff Chris did, and more I wanted to see how those kids felt about it because you get a lot of
Yes.
focus
Yes.
on Will, but you don't get a focus on them. They're just even they Will talks about at the end how his brother Matthew had to step up and be kind of a father figure to them, especially with Dana getting sick and stuff. And I'm like, I would have loved to hear more about that because
Yeah.
I can't imagine what
And
that
hear
was
about
like
that
for
from his
him.
perspective, right?
Exactly. Like that would have been so interesting to hear.
Yeah. No, I'm in complete agreement, sir.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted them to include that I wish they did, but they didn't, was like a little nod to his appearance on Smallville, just because I remember reading all these interviews about how much that meant to him to be included in something Superman related again, especially, with his paralysis. And I would have loved to hear about that experience of like filming that and what that meant to him to kind of return to that universe and stuff.
Yo, I totally forgot he was on that show.
Yeah, it
I haven't
was.
seen Smallville in my defense,
Neither have I.
but
Neither have I.
I knew this, but I had just like you mentioned he was in Smallville, and I was like, wait, what? Who do you play?
He played. I wrote it
Was it
down.
a new like a character they made for the show, or did he play someone from the comics?
No, I believe he played a character for the show. He played a character called Doctor Swan, and he was named after a Superman artist called Kurt Swan.
Oh,
So I think
cool.
it was an original character for the show. But it's something that I saw too with, Kevin Conroy in the later years of his life. Maybe not the best cameo, but he did get to be in Crisis on
Yeah.
Infinite Earths, the like Arrowverse
And
version, and I guess the
doesn't
animated one
doesn't he
too.
die?
Yes, it's not exactly the best cameo, but I remember like hearing all the interviews and stuff and how excited he was to just be like live action Batman and
Yeah.
all that. And I think it's something that they would have done a great job to tie into the theme of Superman of like, hey, he still got to be part of this world even though his physical appearance wasn't there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that is really beautiful, and you're right. That would have been an interesting thing for them to touch on because that must have been close to the end of his life, right?
Yeah, it was definitely because Smallville started in '01 and he died in '04, so it was probably I think '03 or '02.
Okay.
Probably '03. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're right. That would have been a really interesting thing for them to touch on.
Yeah. But I thought it was great. I thought the imagery of there's that poster of this statue of Christopher Reeve kind of like reaching out into space. And
Yeah.
in the documentary they kind of cut back to that frequently with this beautiful score. I don't remember the composer's name. And I kind of loved how that was used very tastefully to kind of just show his resilience and even like the little kryptonite shards forming as like we talk about the struggles and all that, but at the end of the day like that statue and that light shines through. I don't know, it was really crafted well from an artistic standpoint. I That wouldn't have been something I thought of.
Yeah, I thought like this, it had some pretty obvious symbolism in it, like the
Yeah,
kryptonite
right.
and such. But I thought it was used well.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like overly corny or cliche. It
No.
worked.
Did you like the music? Because I'll get
I
into
enjoyed the
awards
score.
a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit later, but yeah, it won an
Did it really?
award for best documentary score of the
That's
year.
cool. Yeah, no, I quite enjoyed the score. That was something that stood out to me.
And that's not something I typically think of with documentaries, some of
No.
those like elements, and I was very impressed. Was there anything else that you loved or disliked or really felt about this one?
Um, I think we pretty much covered everything. Again, it is just kind of one of those things where it's emotional more than
Hmm.
anything. So there's not that much for me to like sit here and break down.
Yeah,
You know, I'm also just not as well versed in documentary filmmaking as I am in narrative, but I thought that it did exactly what it set out to do, and I think that's probably the highest praise I can give it. It set out to kind of make you feel something and teach you about the life of Christopher Reeves, and
yeah,
it accomplished both of those for me.
right. I agree. That was my big takeaway too. Was that I just was, I heard all the raves, I heard all the buzz. James Gunn
Yeah,
calling this like one of his favorite movies of the year and like out of DC, and I was like, okay, this is high expectations. Like, where am I gonna have this met? And I don't know if it met that high of expectations, but I was still really captivated, and I'm a sucker for this type of thing, and it really drew me in, and it made me quite emotional. And it's
yeah,
something that I want to like. I would love to go back and watch some of those Christopher Reeve movies that aren't Superman related to kind of see where
I would
he was
too.
at as a performer.
If there's anything that this movie did get me want to do is check out some of his other work. Especially, I'm curious to see what he did behind the director's chair. Like, I saw he did that baseball movie, and it's like it
Yeah,
looks bad, but I'm God
like
damn it,
what?
I'm curious, man. Like, what the fuck was
Yeah,
he doing with this? I gotta check it out.
yeah. Two interesting pieces of because I always love to see when an actor goes after the director's chair and kind of
It's
takes
very
that
interesting.
approach.
Yeah.
Two things. He did one movie called The Brooke Ellison Story that they showed a little bit of, which is a biopic about being disabled. And it was actually, do you remember they interviewed a disabled person who was Brooke Ellison in it? That was the disabled person they
Yes.
interviewed, who was an activist. She actually passed away. This came out at Sundance in January. She passed away 2 weeks after the movie came out.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, so I was like, in retrospect, it was cool that they included her and a different perspective on that. And I would have loved to see more interviews of people that knew him from that disabled community.
Yeah. 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 Because that is one thing. It did not feel like there were a lot of people that were interviewed. They kept it to a very
They kept it very tight.
like
It was very
it
family
must
centered.
have been under 10 people. Like there were not many people that I feel like they cut back to.
Yeah. Um, and honestly, another thing that I would have loved to see more from disabled people's perspective was they touched on he did a Super Bowl commercial later in his life where
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
kind of presents himself as being able to walk because that was his goal was to find some form of cure or like change or to help people, which is, you know, a conflict for people because in a lot of ways there is no quote unquote cure for something like having a disability. And I would love to see like more nuanced perspectives from directly from them of like how they felt about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I guess that's one thing, we're talking about how we wanted to see more things brought up, but at the same time,
they covered a lot.
They covered a lot, and even some of it didn't feel like it was covered completely, right?
I think a documentary, there's never going to be like something that covers everything. I think there's always going to be, especially when you like can look into the history of stuff, you can find stuff that was cut, and that's another thing that goes down to the edit of like what do we include and what do we excise from this, because I'm sure they had hours and hours of footage that they didn't even use. That was probably interesting.
Oh, dude, they had twice. Like, you could have made a 3-hour movie out of this easy if you really wanted to, but
yeah. The other interesting director's thing, though, was that he was going to direct a 5th Superman movie with a new actor playing Superman. If
Christopher Reeve was?
Yeah, Christopher Reeve was. If the 4th movie was a success, but because Quest for Peace turned out the way it did, you know, he never got the chance. But that would have been fascinating to see.
Yeah. No, that absolutely would have been interesting to see. I had no idea that that was even something that was in the works. Did he have any involvement in Returns?
I don't believe so. I think they had a nod to him, but I don't think he was a producer or anything on that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but that was also Returns came out, you know, after his death, a couple years. So I don't think he was involved in.
Oh, that's true. Sorry,
right.
I got the timeline messed up on that.
But they probably were working on it around, you know, when he passed. So he might have like been aware of it, but I don't know if he was involved in any capacity. But yeah, that was my big takeaway. I know this isn't exactly the most exciting thing to cover on a Exploring DC channel, but I think it's really cool that DC Studios and James Gunn was like, hey, the first thing we're going to put out is like a documentary. Because this wasn't something that they created in-house. They bought this from Sundance for $15 million. And they're like, hey, let's throw it and put it under our production label. And I think that's a really strong sign that they're willing to branch out and do all these interesting projects. We got, so far, Superman, The Penguin, and Creature Commandos, all 3 very different projects.
You know, I hope, honestly, another documentary I'd like to see is if the new DCU is a success, I am on my hands and knees begging them to do an actual authorized documentary on the DCEU.
Yeah.
Please. That would be so fucking interesting.
I think they need more time, right? To separate.
For sure. It would be 20 years from now. 20
But
years, I'm just saying, in my lifetime, can we please get an official
that'd be awesome
documentary where you actually talk to the people involved? Because God, there's just I'm sure what we know about all that stuff is just scratching the surface, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think honestly something that DC probably won't do, but I would love to see them do, is do more documentaries and do more in-depth behind the scenes and making of not only what they're putting out now, but their history and their catalog of films. There's so many old movies, even Batman '89, which we talked about last week. I would love to see a new full-length documentary, kind of exploring everything, and Tim Burton's thoughts about that. Maybe interview him now. That could be something that really sets them apart from Marvel, because Marvel right now is doing very surface level. You go watch their assembled documentaries on their Disney Plus shows or their MCU movies. It's very
they're fun.
It's sanitized, and it's hey, we're gonna show you all the stuff that we want you to see without actually delving into and those especially have so many creative problems and behind the scenes changes.
Yeah, I'm about to say it's the one for Multiverse of Madness. It's a lot of fun to watch it, but it's that movie went through how many reshoots, and you don't hear a peep about it, right? And it does kind of suck, because it's I would be interested to hear. We all know this is happening, and I guess they want to keep their image good for people who may not be in the know, but at the same time, it's that stuff is fascinating to me as someone who's interested in filmmaking. And I guess at the end of the day, people who are interested in filmmaking may not be the target audience for those. It's the Marvel fans, the people who watch that movie and like it, not necessarily people who are trying to get into the industry or who are curious about the technical aspects, right?
It's one of those things where I don't think you talking about flaws or problems you had in production in a documentary is ever damaging to your look. Because if anything, people respect, again, authenticity more than
Yeah. No, I would agree
being
with that.
like hiding stuff. And I think that could be a way that they're not going to do it. I just know, but that would be a way that could really stand themselves apart. I would love to see like, hey, Creature Commandos comes out. Here's a full length, like maybe like an assembled level of like an hour long, but we talk about all the production stuff, not just like very surface. Oh, here's this character, this character, this character. Like here was the storyboarding, and here was all the characters we cut and all the issues we had with recording and all that.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to really touch on before we completely done with this movie is it's getting a lot of awards love. It swept the Critics' Choice documentary awards section and won Best Documentary, Best Director, Best Editing, Best Score, Best Archival Doc, and Best Biographical Doc. So absolutely crushed it. And then just yesterday was the BAFTAs as the time of recording, and it won Best Documentary there. It wasn't even longlisted or shortlisted for the Oscars.
Yeah.
And I'm looking back at it now, and this movie came out in January of last year, and I'm puzzled that it wasn't even considered in
It could just be because
race.
it was an earlier like release, right? I mean that tends to there's a very obvious bias towards movies that release later in the year at the Academy. That's a not little known fact. That's a very apparent. Just look at challengers.
I think with something like documentaries, it's really, I don't know. I don't feel like a lot of documentaries are being nominated just because they came out at a certain point in the year. It's more like what's the best narrative.
That's true.
And especially with all the love and all the attention it got, it was easily like the most talked about documentary last year, unless you count the Pharrell Williams Lego movie. And one of the most right, exactly.
I guess that does technically count as a documentary.
Does technically
doesn't
count.
it?
And like it's probably one of the most talked about documentaries I've heard about in years, to the point where I, went out of my way to watch it and cover it for this channel. It's just something I would have liked to see, maybe not win documentary, but like would have loved to see more in the actual Oscars awards race.
Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah. And I'm curious to see. We have 2 out of 3 DC Studios projects so far been nominated for awards, because we had Penguin up for a ton of Emmys and stuff like that. And
you're right. And it
Superman's been up.
Won some too.
It's won some. And I think even Creature Commandos will probably be up for some animated awards.
Yeah.
In Emmys or Annies or whatever it be. So I'm curious to see if they keep that up with Superman and Clayface and all these other projects.
I hope so.
Yeah. So yeah, that was our discussion on Superman. I think it was a wonderful doc. I loved watching it, and I think it was cool to talk about something like that, because it's challenging to really dive into a documentary. It's not something I've really done before compared to narrative, like you said.
Yeah.
So we have a few news stories to talk about. 2 quick ones. We won't talk about much, but Lanterns reportedly started production this week. That is exciting, because I would love to see, more casting announcements and more like an idea of where they're going. And I think hearing about like filming locations and stuff is going to kind of give us an idea of that.
Yeah.
But
is Guy Gardner just gonna fucking die in Superman?
I don't think so, but I don't think he's going to be in this show. I feel like he's not going to tonally fit.
Yeah. But it's also just like Guy Gardner's such an essential like part of the Green Lantern lore. It's a little interesting that he doesn't seem to be in it at all.
In the Lantern show?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm wondering how much it's even going to focus on other Lanterns, because as far as we know, it's an Earth-based story, and it's very focused on Hal and John. And I'm like, I think we're going to get like aspects of the core and the greater thing, but it's going to be similar to, Green Lantern stuff we've gotten in the past, where it just focuses on like a single lantern or two.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But
and it also is on an HBO budget, so it's not like
that's true.
You can do the epic sci-fi. I do hope we get a Green Lantern movie at some point, just because I would like to see the spectacle of it all done justice.
Mm-hmm. I think we will see it. It really depends on what this show does and how its quality is. But I will say they've done it with a few shows, and it doesn't always work. But them putting it on their HBO like linear channel and being like, "Hey, this isn't a Max show. This is like a proper HBO show that we're going to show to especially like it's going to be shown to audiences that are not online because they're like watching cable TV and being like they see Lanterns on HBO, and I think that's a good sign of confidence. But then again,
Yeah.
we've seen shows like the Dune Prophecy show be put on regular HBO, and look how that, or The Idol, you know.
Dude,
it's like, look how that
I
turned
didn't watch a single episode of that Dune show. I totally
neither
forgot
did
it
I,
existed.
and I love the
crazy.
Dune movies, so
And that got renewed for season 2, did it not?
yeah, I did.
That's
So,
crazy.
I'm hoping Lantern sticks out a little more than, because the Penguin got put on regular HBO, and you know, look how that turned out.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then speaking of that universe, Robert Pattinson, they're always asking these guys about the Batman Part 2. They just can't.
They've been asking them about the Batman Part 2 since Batman came out.
And it's like they know nothing, because I'm sure Matt Reeves barely has like a full script really going.
Yeah.
But Pattinson's like said that they're filming at the end of 25, and I believe
He also
that.
said he knows what it's about.
He knows what it's about now.
Yeah,
but
I think he just found out in like the last couple weeks.
he probably got interviewed, and then he was like, I don't know what this movie's about. What am I doing? And then he asked Reeves about it. I'm excited for it to start filming. I still am just like amazed that they cannot get this done by end of 26.
It's shocking.
Or even like if they're filming at the end of 25, how are we not coming out the beginning half of 27? Why are we coming out in October? This is a very long production timetable for a Batman movie.
It just begs the question, what the fuck is going on? Like,
Right.
There's something happening. Obviously, something big that we don't know about. But I just, like, nobody seems to want to give a straight answer on what it is. And I'm sure we will find out this year at some point what has been kind of holding this up. But, like, at this point, it's just like I'm done theorizing because I just have no idea.
Yeah, it's obviously one of the big theories that people have put out there is that they're going to merge this Reeves verse and what they're doing with Robert Pattinson with the DCU. And I'm curious if that's going to happen. Like, when are we going to hear about it? Because are we going to start production on this, like, not even knowing that it's part of, or not part of or not part of? I'd like a definitive, like, hey, either this Batman Brave and the Bold movie is happening and here's everything that's going on, or the Batman is part of the DCU, and then we don't have to be in limbo for it.
I imagine this year we will know for sure. If I had to guess by like the time that the ball drops at the end of the year, I'm guessing we will have definitive answers on everything you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because if he's not in the DCU, which I'm just, to put it bluntly, Gunn has been playing coy about that.
Yeah.
For the past couple months.
Absolutely.
I even when he's like tried to deny it, he's done it in a way that's just like, you're not really saying no, not definitively. At least the ones that I've seen. The interviews I've seen of him talking about it.
Right. It's so interesting having like a creator, like head of the studio, being so online, and we've talked about
he's in a chronic liar,
chronic online, but it's
chronic
cool
fibber.
It's cool to at least see like some idea of what's going on, because a lot of time you like, you know, you
Kevin
hear from Kevin Feige like every 6 months.
You know what I was talking about with my buddy the other day? Actually, I was talking with Jalen about this. And we were like, dude, I can't imagine just like walking past Kevin Feige on the street, you know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like he doesn't like think about if you were just at a restaurant and you just see Kevin Feige, like just with his wife and kids. Like that doesn't register.
Like a real,
that doesn't feel. That doesn't make sense in my head. Like Kevin Feige is a robot that just comes out to be on Comic-Con stages and then he goes back. Like I think She-Hulk was right with that, but James Gunn is completely just. I think if I can see that dude just existing. You know what I mean? And yeah, he's a little chronically online, but.
James Gunn feels like the type of guy that I could clip this right now and post it and be like, "Hey, James Gunn, we have a podcast about DC," and he would like comment about it. Like
you would see that shit.
Yeah, so it's cool that like it's cool and not cool, because I like the mystique a little bit, but at the same time, it's like I love that he's shouting out and like talking to. Sometimes he talks to people that obviously don't exist, but when he talks to like just regular fans that are asking small questions, it's cool to get insight into like what their mind.
And some of the stuff I think is really interesting. I like when he'll go out and confirm, you know, some reports, give it validity. Like he confirmed the DP of Supergirl, stuff like that. I just think He seems to get a little bit better at shutting up sometimes.
A little better PR and stuff,
Yeah.
for sure. The other thing with Batman is if they're filming at the end of 25, do you think they're going for a certain like setting, like maybe winter or because the first movie is very
You
clearly
are
like
so right, and I didn't
Halloween,
think about that.
right?
No, but it has to be winter because Penguin ends up in winter, right?
Right,
And
and
it takes place supposedly a couple months after that.
I'm wondering if that's why they want to release it later in the year, and they've
I
stuck to that
didn't
later in
even
the
think
year.
about that.
You know,
I was wondering why he said late 2025, and I'm guessing it's just so they can get natural, miserable winter weather.
yeah, and I'm
It all
wondering
makes
even
sense.
if they want to release it in like October or November or something like that because it has some Christmas theme, which would be interesting because of Batman Returns and that Christmas theme and like
Yeah.
kind of repeating that cycle. I would love to kind of get a confirmation on that too of like is this a Christmas movie or not?
Jesus Christ. I just like, you just rocked my whole world because I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. I forgot. I just did not remember that.
Matt Reeves, if you give me a Batman Returns in modern day with Mr. Freeze as the villain and Christmas and everything, I'm gonna be in love, dude.
Yeah.
I
I think that's
the
just
best
like,
thing
that's
ever.
what everybody wants.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's
I
going
have-
to be great. And that's the thing. It's like,
That's
no matter
Mr.
how long
Freeze
we
right
wait.
there.
Oh, is it? I didn't even notice that. That's
Yeah.
cool.
That's what I want to see as the new villain. That's my
Yeah.
my vote right now.
Yeah, I'd be so down.
Yeah. And then the last big thing that I wanted to talk about was Clayface as a movie. It's coming out in 26. It's coming out
Yep.
before the Batman. It's coming out before Brave and the Bold. And that's very interesting in and of itself. But
Yeah.
right now they're looking for directors. There was an initial report by Deadline that threw around a Jeff Wadlow and James Watkins. Jeff Wadlow
Yep.
is a Blumhouse director, and he is not the best track record at all. Like Fantasy
Yeah.
Island, Truth or Dare, Imaginary, these really like low budget, trashy Blumhouse movies. Not that he's a bad person or anything, but not the best output. And then the other guy they threw around was James Watkins, who right now is known for doing the Speak No Evil remake, which people actually seem to like. That
Yeah.
was a James McAvoy movie from, again, Blumhouse. But a new report came out that said they were never looking at Jeff Wadlow, which, like, bless, thank you. They had looked at J.A. Bayona, who did Jurassic World 2, but more importantly, he did Society of the Snow, which is like a really awesome Netflix movie that came out in last year's awards
Yeah.
push. But he passed on it, and right now they are still looking at James Watkins.
passed
to Speak
on
No
it,
Evil.
really?
Yeah, he passed on it.
That
they're
sucks
looking
because,
at-
like, the 10 minutes, or not, sorry, the 30 minutes in Jurassic World 2, when it just becomes like a fucking
Yeah.
horror movie, is like the best stretch of 30 minutes out of any of those stupid ass movies.
Yeah,
You know?
or even like, you didn't watch Society of the Snow, right?
I didn't, and I that's one that's on my list. That's one I meant to catch that year.
So Society of the Snow, without getting too much into that, is a movie about this plane crash and they're
Yeah.
stuck on this mountain for
Very relevant.
however many days. That's terrifying. Like some of the
Yeah.
scenes in there, especially when they realize what they have to do, without getting into it, that would be like, that's where I really would have loved to see kind of his take on what they're doing with Clayface. And that was a name that was like, dang, I'm sad that he passed on it. I have not seen the Speak No Evil remake. I do not know how to feel about this James Watkins if he is like the front runner.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. As I said, I've had friends who have seen it. They all really liked it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good sign, and they seem really confident in the script.
Yeah.
So as long as you get a solid director, you should be in business. I'm interested why Flanagan isn't helming it.
They said that Flanagan isn't working on it because he's working on all that. He's working on the Exorcist, not Exorcist.
Oh yeah.
Oh, he is working on Exorcist, right? He's working on
Yeah.
the new Exorcist movie. He's working on the Carrie series or whatever he's doing there. He's got
So he's
the
just busy.
Dark Tower adaptation. I don't think he has time, man.
He's doing a
with this-
Dark Tower adaptation.
Yeah, because he
Oh,
wanted
God.
to do it so bad, and they messed it up with the 2017.
Yeah.
He's got so much on his plate, and I think with that 26 hard date, like it would not happen with Mike Flanagan.
That's valid. And look, if he just wrote a script that he really was passionate about and really loved, and he just
Just
needs
sent it
someone
in.
else to shoot it, yeah, fair.
But my big takeaway right now from this is that they're looking at horror directors, which is good because that's the
Yes.
tint I want to see from it. I've been thinking so much about like what they're gonna do, and they've talked about like him injecting himself with a substance because obviously he's gonna turn to, he's not gonna be like the Clayface from the OG comics where it's just like a guy in a mask.
Yeah.
It's going to be the monster. But I would love to see some like incorporation of the Hollywood stuff of Basil Karlo, him being an actor, and then like tying in, him becoming like a clay monster. I don't know, like not entirely similar to. There's been discussions of like its similarities to the Substance movie that came out.
Yeah.
I would like to see something similar of like this guy who's struggling with where he's at as an actor and his place in the world with fame and all that, and him using this substance and like kind of exploring that dark turn of like perfectionism and never being enough.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that would be a really interesting angle to take.
Yeah, but it's one of those projects that initially was like, why are we kind of doing this, especially when you announced a Batman movie, and why is that not coming out first? But the more I've thought about it, the more I've heard about kind of what they're trying to do.
And also just Gunn's approach of only actually going ahead with projects that have good scripts is
right.
Good.
Yeah. I remember when the initial slate for this DCU came out in like early 23, and there was stuff like The Authority and Brave and the Bold and even Booster Gold, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like super excited about some of this stuff. Right now, like looking at the lineup of like Superman and Lanterns and Supergirl and Clayface, I'm like, this is a lot more exciting to me. This is clearly
it's a
passion
damn
projects.
solid lineup.
Yeah, and I know it's not like the heavy hitters, but yeah, I think the early MCU wasn't the heavy hitters either, right? And I think they're going to put out really interesting projects that's going to build that foundation, and Clayface is one that I think people are going to like fall in love with.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know if you had any other thoughts about Clayface and
I just think it's cool that a movie like this is getting made.
Yeah, me too. Especially with like the amount of like villain movies we got and villain projects.
Yeah.
To see DC actually put effort into some, Joker 2 aside, is really cool because the Penguin and Clayface are both like really cool projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, that'll do it for us, guys. We are a little light this week, but we are going to be back better than ever next week with if you guys are on video, Kingdom Come, our first comic episode.
Yep. I've never read that one. I'm excited.
Very excited because that has been a goal with this project, is to delve into comics again, and I think Kingdom Come will be really relevant to where we are going with Superman and stuff.
I'm excited to give it a read.
Yep. Thank you guys for coming on this journey with us, and I'm excited to see you guys next week. Bye.